He was the architect of the terror, the incorruptible, the man who held France in an icy grip. We all know the name Maximilien Robespierre, but what about his last day? How did the most powerful man in the revolution go from signing death warrants to facing the guillotine himself, all in just 24 hours? This is the story of how the hunter became the hunted. It all began on the morning of July 27, 1794. The air in the National Convention was thick with fear. When Robespierre stood up to speak, everyone held their breath. For 2 long hours he spoke of conspiracies, of traitors lurking in the shadows, of enemies within their very ranks. But this wasn't the usual, confident Robespierre. His hands trembled. His voice, once a weapon that could sway a nation, now quivered with uncertainty. He made a fatal mistake. He hinted at a new purge, but named no one. In that moment, every single deputy in that hall felt the cold steel of the guillotine on their own neck. He had united them all, not in loyalty, but in terror of him. The spell was broken. When he finished, the applause was weak, almost mocking. Then, one by one, his enemies rose. Jean Lambert Tallien, whose lover Robespierre had imprisoned, brandished a dagger and called him a tyrant. Bloodshed, a fellow member of the Committee of Public Safety, accused him of plotting a dictatorship. The dam had burst. The very men who had once followed him now turned on him. The incorruptible was now the accused. By noon, the vote was cast. Robespierre, his younger brother Augustin, and his closest allies were declared under arrest. But this was far from over. News of his arrest spread like wildfire through Paris. The Paris Commune, the city's radical government loyal to Robespierre, was not about to let its leader fall. They declared the convention's order illegal. That evening, a mob of armed supporters stormed the prison where Robespierre was held. They broke him out and carried him in triumph to the Hôtel de Ville, Paris's city hall. It was meant to be a sanctuary, a fortress from which he could launch his counterattack. But it was also a trap, a highly visible target right in the heart of the city. As night fell, the situation grew desperate. Thousands of soldiers, loyal to the convention, began to surround City Hall. Inside, Robespierre hesitated. His supporters urged him to act, to lead them in an assault against his enemies. Escape routes were available, boats waited on the Seine, horses were ready, but he refused. Why? Was it pride? A belief that the people of Paris would rise up to save him? Or was it the chilling realization that he was too famous, too infamous, to ever truly disappear? His indecision was fatal. Meanwhile, his support was crumbling. François Henriot, the commander of the National Guard and Robespierre's last military hope, staggered into City Hall, roaring drunk and completely useless. His men, seeing their leader in a stupor, began to drift away. The crowd outside the Hôtel de Ville, which had gathered to cheer him, started to melt back into the night. Then came the final blow. Around midnight, the convention made a terrifying declaration. Robespierre and his followers were now outlaws. This wasn't just an arrest warrant. It meant they were stripped of all rights. They could be identified and executed on the spot, with no trial, no defense, no appeal. Shortly after 2 a.m., the soldiers of the convention stormed the building. The scene inside descended into chaos. Gunfire echoed through the grand halls. Faced with certain capture, Robespierre's inner circle fell apart. One loyalist, Lebas, shot himself in the head, choosing death over dishonor. Robespierre's brother Augustin, in a desperate bid to escape, leaped from a high window, shattering both of his legs on the cobblestones below. Couthon, paralyzed from the waist down, was thrown down a staircase in his wheelchair, and Robespierre, he raised a pistol to his own head. But in the chaos, the shot was botched. The bullet didn't kill him. Instead, it tore through his cheek and shattered his jaw, leaving him alive, in agony, and unable to speak. He was found lying in a pool of his own blood. They threw him onto a wooden board and carried him through the streets he once ruled. The crowds that had feared him now jeered and cursed him. They brought him back to the very committee room where he had presided over the terror, his jaw crudely bound with a blood-soaked bandage. The irony was savage. The man whose words had sent thousands to their deaths was now silenced, able to do nothing but groan in pain. His trial, if you can even call it that, was a formality. He was an outlaw. All they needed to do was confirm his identity. No defense was offered, none was allowed. The sentence was already written. The next afternoon, the tumbril, the death cart, carried him and his remaining allies to the Place de la Révolution. The crowd was enormous, a sea of faces, all there to witness the downfall of the tyrant. They sang, they danced, they hurled insults and garbage as he was strapped to the plank of the guillotine. The executioner ripped the bandage from his jaw. For the first time in hours, a sound escaped Robespierre's lips, not a word, not a plea, but a guttural scream of pure, animal pain. It was the last sound he would ever make. Moments later, the blade fell. A roar of celebration erupted across Paris. The terror was over. The revolution had, in its most famous act, devoured its own child. But the story has one last, chilling postscript. That evening, officials searched his modest apartment. They found what you might expect: books, papers, careful notes on his expenses. They even found a half-starved dog he had been feeding with surprising tenderness. But hidden away, they found something else. They found his plans. a list containing the names of over 100 more deputies marked for the guillotine. He was planning an even greater purge, one that would dwarf the terror that came before. Some documents even sketched out proposals for multiple mechanized guillotines designed to speed up the process of execution. It was a vision of industrialized slaughter. His fall wasn't just the end of a man. It was an accident of history. A few minutes of hesitation, a single botched shot, and the course of the French Revolution changed forever. Thank you so much for watching. It's a stark reminder of how quickly power can shift and how thin the line is between leader and tyrant. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the most dramatic moments in history. We'll see you in the next one.